My name is Mark. I am 32, and I make my living with a camera in my hands. Not the kind that makes you famous, the kind that makes you patient. When I am looking through a lens, I feel calm. I can turn a wild place into a frame, and the frame feels like control. If I am honest, I can get arrogant behind the lens. That is why I went into the Black Forest alone. It was late in the season, wet enough that everything smelled like soil, and quiet enough that you could hear your own breath. I was there for a rare owl that shows up for a few nights and then disappears again. I had been chasing it for weeks. I wanted a clean photo and a small, private victory. Then I wanted to be left alone. I set up my tent in a flat spot between tall trees. The fabric was old but reliable. Inside, I lined up my gear the way I always do. Phone, power bank, headlamp, spare batteries, GPS. Then the trail camera. That was my comfort item. Small, black, practical. I mounted it on a tree at the edge of a narrow corridor where animals usually pass. I checked the angle, the date, the time, infrared mode, sensitivity. The screen flashed, then went dark. It felt like I had posted a guard. When I crawled into the tent, I was tired in an ordinary way. My shoulders ached, my fingers were stiff, and my socks were still slightly damp. That annoyed me more than it should have. I took my boots off at the entrance because I hate dirt in the tent. I placed them beside the door flap where I could reach them without thinking. I zipped up, turned off the headlamp, and listened. At first, it was just night. A drip from leaves, a distant branch shifting, a soft rush of wind. Then I heard the trail camera click. Tiny, far away but clear. I smiled in the dark. An animal, I thought. Maybe even the owl. The click came again, then again. Not constant, but close enough together that it stopped feeling random. I held still and waited for the forest to settle, but it did not. The night got flatter, like someone had pressed a hand against it. I told myself the sensor was being fooled by moisture. Fog can move like a body in infrared. Wind can twitch a branch. I reminded myself that I came out here to record movement, and movement was what I was getting. Still, the timing bothered me. I reached for my phone to check the time and saw the screen glow without me touching it. Just a soft light, then darkness. I stared at it, then at my hands. I was not moving. I blamed a bad setting and tried to let it go. I told myself the camera would catch whatever it was. The trail camera went quiet for a long stretch. That silence started to feel worse than the clicking. If it was wind, it should keep triggering. If it was an animal, it should pass and trigger again. But it stopped, and the stop felt deliberate. I listened for the owl call I wanted so badly, but the night stayed blank. The cold deepened suddenly. It did not creep in. It arrived, as if a door had opened in the forest. My skin prickled. The inside of the tent felt close, and my breath left a thin fog against the fabric. I listened harder and noticed something I did not like. When I moved inside the tent, the outside sounds seemed to pause. When I froze, they returned. I tested it again, a hand shift, then stillness. Each time, the quiet snapped into place like a switch. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself I was tired, but I could not unfeel it. I opened the zipper just a little and let damp air slide in. Then I clicked my headlamp on and angled it through the gap. Trees, wet leaves, black space between trunks. No eyes, no clear shape. But the shadows looked thicker than they should, and my light did not seem to reach as far as it had earlier. For a moment, I thought I saw a darker vertical line between two trunks, like a person standing still. But when I held the beam steady, it became just another patch of forest. And yet the darkness did not feel empty. It felt occupied, like a room where someone stands just outside the doorway and refuses to step in. I shut the zipper again. I wanted to check the trail camera, to see what had triggered it, to prove I was being stupid. I reached down for my boots. My fingers found the right boot. The left boot was there too, but not exactly where I remembered it. Only a small shift, the kind you can blame on nothing. I stared at it anyway, trying to force my mind to replay the moment I placed it. I could not. I sat in the dark with my breathing slow, waiting for a sound that would explain everything. Nothing came. No step in wet soil, no branch snap, just the soft pressure of the forest around me. At one point, the trail camera clicked once, very softly, then went quiet again. That single click felt like a decision. At some point I slept, but it was light sleep. When I woke, the tent was gray with early morning. Birds were calling like nothing had happened. For a few seconds, I felt relief. Then I reached for my boots. My hand touched one boot, then empty space. I froze and searched again, slower. The right boot was there, the left boot was not. Gone. Not kicked away, not hidden under my pack. Gone as if it had been lifted and carried out with intent. I sat still for a long time. I did not run outside. I did not shout. I just listened. Because the only thing worse than being alone is knowing you are not alone and having no idea where the other person is. The thought of my trail camera did not comfort me anymore. It made me feel exposed. I packed fast with one shoe and one cold sock. The forest looked innocent, and that made me angry. I walked straight to the tree where I had mounted the trail camera. The latch snapped when I opened it, sharp in the quiet morning. I pulled the card and slid it into my phone. The first clips were nothing. Leaves moving, shadows, a fox at a distance. Then I found the file with the timestamp, 3 a.m. I tapped it and held my breath. The image was steady. Infrared made the world look pale and flat. And there he was, a man standing right outside my tent, close enough that the faint glow from the fabric outlined his shoulders. His face stayed mostly hidden in shadow, but I could still see a mouth. He was smiling, not wide, small and calm like he had practiced it. He was looking directly at the camera, like he knew exactly where it was. Like he wanted me to find this later, when it was too late to change anything. Then I saw what he was holding, my left hiking boot. He held it by the heel, casual, almost gentle, as if it belonged to him. I watched the clip again. The man did not do much. He did not rush. He just stood there and smiled into my false safety. The file ended without showing him leave. It simply cut back to empty forest. I left after that. I found signal and called the police. I tried to keep my voice calm because panic makes you sound less believable. I showed them the video and told them what I could. A person outside my tent at 3 a.m. holding my boot. They asked questions I could not answer. Who was he? Why was he there? Did he do anything else? I had no proof, only the proof that he had been at my door and that I had slept anyway. They took my statement and wrote it down like it belonged in a small file. In daylight, the place looked harmless, and that made it harder to explain. No broken tent, no injury, no clear threat. Just a man who had stood close enough to touch my life, then vanished back into trees. Later, at home, I replayed the clip on a bigger screen. It did not get clearer. It only got worse. The smile stayed calm. The shadows stayed thick. the boot stayed in his hand like a message. I used to think a camera was a shield. Now I know it can be an invitation. I still use trail cameras, but I do not feel safe when they click anymore. I feel seen. I do not camp alone now. I keep my light closer. I listen to silence like it is a sound. The worst part is not that he stole my boot. The worst part is how easy it was, and how patient he seemed. Sometimes I wake up before dawn and check the time without meaning to. When I see 3 o'clock, I do not feel sudden panic. I feel a dull certainty that the line between safe and not safe is thinner than fabric, and it makes no sound when it moves. My name is Julian. I am 26, and I have always been careful in a boring way. Rules calm me down. If there is a sign, I read it. If there is a form, I fill it out. After a long week at my corporate job, I wanted one quiet weekend where nobody needed anything from me. I chose an official national park campground because it felt like the safest kind of alone. It was late autumn, present day. The air was damp and cold, and the road into the park narrowed between wet trees. When I reached the campground, it was empty. No tents, no cars, no lights in the bathroom building. The kiosk at the entrance was still there, with a map and instructions and a metal payment slot. I told myself the emptiness was normal for the off-season. I told myself it was better this way. I checked in anyway. I read the board. I parked inside the lines. I picked a site near the main lane, close to the exit, where staff would pass if they did patrols. Setting up my tent felt like turning noise down in my head. Stakes in, lines tight, zipper working, keys in my pocket. Small, correct actions that make you believe nothing bad can happen. By full dark, the campground felt sealed in. The trees stood still, and the smell of wet leaves sat heavy in the air. I ate something simple and lay down early. I expected a boring night. All week, I had felt like I was being watched. By screens, by calendars, by people who always want an answer. Out here, I wanted the opposite. I wanted to disappear into a place that is official and boring. That is the strange thing about me. I do not look for adventure. I look for a safe kind of isolation, the kind that comes with posted rules and the idea that someone is responsible. I woke to an engine. At first it was far away, a low idle that came and went. Then it stopped completely, like a car had pulled in and chosen to wait. A minute later, I saw a slow sweep of light through the tent fabric, not aimed at me, more like headlights turning behind trees. My first thought was still comforting. Maintenance, a late camper, a ranger. This was a national park, not a random pull-off. I tried to relax into that logic. When the engine sound faded the second time, I almost got up to look outside. Then I did not, because stepping out without a reason felt wrong, like leaving the safe boundary of the tent for no official purpose. I hated that thought, even as I had it. I stayed still and listened, and the longer I listened, the more the quiet felt shaped, as if the empty campground was holding its breath with me. The quiet did not settle. A soft, repetitive tapping I had noticed earlier near the bathroom building, maybe a loose sign or a drip, stopped all at once. The moment it stopped, the air inside my tent felt colder. I lay still and listened for it to start again. It did not. Then I heard footsteps on gravel. They were steady, not rushed, and they came along the lane as if the person belonged there. The sound paused near my sight. I held my breath. A flashlight beam swept across the outside of my tent, slow and careful. It never shone directly into the mesh. It felt like the light was trying to look without being seen. A voice spoke, calm and practiced. "Sir, this is the park ranger. I need you to listen. This is for your safety." My mouth went dry. I sat up slowly. "Hello?" I said. "What is going on?" "There is a severe flash flood warning," he said. "You need to pack immediately. Do not wait. You will follow my truck out of the campground. Do you understand?" Flash flood. In late autumn. My mind tried to argue with it, but the word ranger pulled me toward obedience. It was exactly the kind of authority that usually makes me feel safe. Still, small details scraped at me. The belt jingle sounded too light. The radio crackle sounded thin, like empty noise. And his questions were not about weather. "Are you alone? Is your vehicle working? Does anyone know you are here?" I should have asked for his name. I should have asked to see a badge. Instead, I said, "Yes, I understand, because my body treats uniforms like instructions." "There is no time to check the board," he said. "The roads will be blocked soon. Pack now. When you are in your car, keep your headlights on and follow my truck. Do not stop." I thought about calling the park number on the board. I even reached for my phone. There was no signal, or maybe one weak bar that felt like a joke. The ranger heard the movement and spoke again, still calm. "There is no time for calls. You need to move now." He said it with the same tone my managers use when they are pretending to help. The tone that makes you feel childish for doubting. I stared at the zipper line of my tent and listened to my own breathing. If he was real, obeying was the safe choice. If he was not, obeying could still be the safe choice because staying put could be worse. My mind went in circles, and each circle ended at the same place. Pack, follow, do what you are told. The cold pressed harder. The tent fabric felt damp against my knuckles, and the walls seemed to lean inward with the weight of the night. The campground was too quiet, like the forest had decided to listen. I turned on my small light and started stuffing things into a bag, fast and clumsy. I kept thanking him, because that is what I do when I feel trapped. He did not answer. He only repeated one word, calm as a clock. "Hurry." When I unzipped the tent and stepped out, the air felt sharp. The ranger stood a few meters away, still and patient, flashlight angled down. In the darkness, the uniform looked almost right. I could not see his face clearly, only the shape of his head and the calm set of his body. He did not help. He only watched, as if watching was the job. I carried my bag to my car and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I turned the key. The engine started, and the familiar sound almost soothed me. Then my headlights came on, and the white light flooded the sight. In that light, the uniform fell apart. The name tag on his chest was upside down. Not crooked, upside down, like someone had copied the idea of a ranger without understanding it. My eyes dropped to his belt. The radio was plastic and glossy, a cheap toy. It hung there, pretending to be a tool. The man did not move. He did not rush me. He did not raise his voice. He just stood in my headlights with a small, calm mouth, like he had been waiting for me to notice, like it did not matter when I did. In that moment, the trap became simple. The uniform was not there to protect me. It was there to guide me. It was meant for someone like me, someone who follows instructions first and thinks later. I stopped packing. I locked my doors. The click sounded loud. I put the car in gear and drove. I expected him to run, to shout, to step into the lane. He did none of it. In the mirror, I saw him take one slow step forward and stop again. There were no headlights behind me, no truck, no chase. The road stayed dark, and that made my skin crawl. If he did not need to follow, then his plan was never about speed. It was about trust. I drove until I found lights. A gas station with a cashier behind glass and a few cars that made the world feel real. Only then did I call. The police listened. They looked at the campground later in daylight. In daylight, it was wet leaves, gray sky, empty sights. No storm, no flood, no ranger truck. The next day, an official called me back. His tone was polite and flat. He told me there is no night shift in that park, not in the off-season. No ranger patrol at 2 a.m., no flash flood warning issued, no staff truck dispatched. He could not give me a reason for the man, only the fact that the system I trusted had not been there at all. I went home safe, and I told myself I should feel grateful. What I felt was smaller and worse, a kind of embarrassment, like I had almost handed myself over because a stranger wore the right shape. Now I notice uniforms everywhere. A security guard in my office lobby, a worker in a reflective jacket near the road, a calm voice that says, "This is for your safety." I listen for the cheap sounds, for the wrong details, for the way authority can be used like a leash. Sometimes I wake up and check the time without thinking. If I see 2 a.m., my chest tightens before I can stop it. Not because I believe he is outside my window, because I remember how quietly he stood in the dark and how close I came to following. My name is Victor, and I am 35. When I left my car by the old service road that evening, all I wanted was one full night of sleep. I work in an ER, and after years of alarms, bright lights, and people asking me to choose fast and choose right, tiredness stopped feeling normal. It felt deeper than that, like something in me had been used too hard for too long. I did not come to the hill for adventure. I came because I wanted one place where nobody could reach me and nothing would ask anything from me. There were no trails up there, no marked camps, and no reason for another person to walk that far unless they were looking for the same silence. That was exactly why I kept climbing. Hours passed between the car and the flat patch of ground I finally chose, and by then the light had gone soft and thin. The hill felt empty in a clean way, untouched and almost careless. I pitched the tent, crawled inside, and listened to the wind move over the grass. The fabric around me was thin, but it gave the night a shape, and for the first time in months, I felt close to letting go. The first sound came after dark, one small crunch beyond the tent, as if a shoe had pressed down carefully on dry ground and then stopped. I opened my eyes and listened, but nothing followed. The hill had its own small noises, wind in the grass, a little movement in the tent fabric, my gear settling into place, and I told myself it belonged to one of those. I had spent too many nights at work hearing patterns in monitors and footsteps in hallways, and I knew what exhaustion could do. When you stay alert for too long, your mind starts building meaning where there is none. Then I heard another crunch, placed too neatly in the silence to feel natural. This time I stayed still. There was no path outside, no nearby campsite, no good reason for anyone to be up there after dark. I almost unzipped the tent and looked out, but the idea felt foolish. I did not want to shine a light into empty darkness and confirm that I was letting my nerves take over. I told myself it was grass giving under the wind, or a small animal crossing the slope, or my brain refusing to leave the hospital behind. That should have settled me. Instead, once the thought entered my mind that the sound might be human, the whole hill changed. The same distance that had felt peaceful now made every careful noise feel wrong, and what disturbed me most was the sense that something out there had paused, as if it were waiting for me to decide what I had heard. I do not know how much time passed after that. I only know I stopped trying to sleep in any honest way. I kept my eyes shut, but I was listening with the hard attention I usually save for a room where something is about to go wrong. The hill stayed quiet long enough for me to feel embarrassed by my own tension, and then a slow step pressed into the ground near the tent wall. It was close enough that the fabric beside me stopped feeling like shelter and started feeling like a reminder of how little separated me from whatever stood outside. I held my breath and waited for a second step, but none came. That was worse. I told myself the sound had to be distorted by the hill, that distance was harder to judge at night, that the tired mind reaches for the worst shape first. Still, the space beyond the fabric no longer felt empty. A few minutes later, there was a soft drag, so light I almost missed it. It sounded like fingertips brushing the outer fly, or cloth moving against cloth. The touch was not forceful. It was gentle enough to seem careful. That was what made it feel deliberate. I almost said, "Hello," but the words stayed in my throat because I was suddenly certain I did not want an answer. The quiet that followed had weight. I could not see anything. I could not measure distance. I could not tell whether I was being watched, studied, or simply kept awake on purpose. I kept one hand near the zipper of my sleeping bag and hated the fact that it was the only action available to me. The next sound was a small shift of weight in the grass, close, patient, and so controlled that I understood with a cold clarity that whatever was outside was not lost. A lost hiker would call out. An animal would scratch, sniff, move on. This presence did none of that. It stayed just beyond the tent in a way that felt almost respectful, and that false respect made it harder to bear. It was as if the boundary of the tent mattered only because crossing it was a choice being postponed. I saw nothing, yet I could feel my body reacting as if I were looking straight at a face. My mouth had gone dry. The sleeping bag felt too narrow around my legs. Every breath seemed loud enough to tell the person outside exactly where I was. Then the ground eased again under one careful step, then another, not circling the tent, not leaving, just changing position. I imagined someone standing there with all the time in the world, listening to me listen back. The isolation I had wanted folded in on itself. I was not hidden from the world. I was hidden with something I could not see. By then, I was no longer waiting to sleep. I was waiting for the next quiet sign that the person outside had decided not to go away. Once, I thought I heard breathing, but I could not trust it. Once, I thought I heard the slightest press near the door, and then nothing followed. Each time the hill fell still, I hoped it was over. Each time the stillness held too long, I understood that this was part of it. Whoever was outside was not rushing toward anything. They were letting the waiting do the work. At some point, I must have slipped into a thin, broken sleep because I woke all at once and knew immediately that something was wrong. The darkness inside the tent was complete. For a second, I did not move, and then I heard it. The zipper on the outer door was being pulled down very slowly, one tooth at a time, with such steady control that the sound seemed to pass through my body instead of through the air. I froze inside the sleeping bag so hard that my muscles hurt. I could not even lift my head. All I could do was listen as the opening widened inch by inch. It stopped halfway. I waited for hands, for a face, for the tent to collapse, for anything that would at least give the moment a clear shape. Nothing came. There was only the half-opened door, the cold air slipping in, and the sound of heavy breathing just outside the gap. Close, human, unhurried. Whoever stood there had opened the tent enough to prove they could come in, and then chosen not to. I lay there without moving, holding my breath until my chest burned, knowing with absolute certainty that someone was standing a few feet away in the dark and looking in. The worst part was how long it lasted. Because after the zipper stopped, nothing changed except the sound of that breathing. It came in and out of the opening with a slow weight that made the tent feel occupied, even though the person never stepped inside. I kept waiting for a voice, a hand, some sudden rush that would turn the fear into an event I could understand. But the minutes passed, and the only thing happening was that someone remained there, close enough to enter, and chose instead to stand in silence. I had spent years around pain, blood, panic, and people on the edge of death. None of that prepared me for being left still and conscious inside my own fear. I do not know what they were looking at, or whether they could see me clearly, or whether the whole point was simply to let me know that the barrier between us was thin and temporary. Mercy should have felt like relief, but this did not feel like mercy. It felt like permission being withheld. I kept imagining a face in the darkness beyond the opening, taking in the shape of the tent and the proof that I could do nothing but wait. Then, the zipper began to move upward. It rose one tooth at a time, just as slowly as it had come down, until the door was closed. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps fading across the hill. I stayed where I was until the sky began to pale, afraid that any movement would call the person back. When morning finally came, the hill looked empty again. That made it worse. There was no answer for why someone had climbed to a place with no trail, opened my tent halfway, breathed into the dark, and left me untouched. I packed with shaking hands and walked back to the car, but the question stayed with me all the way down. Why did he come? What did he see when he looked in? And why did he decide that leaving me alive with the memory was enough?